over to Linden to Water Street. This L-shaped portion of your city street system was the first trackage that was laid out. And they didn't stop there. The next area they were concerned about was Chestnut Street over to the Ponce de Leon Springs. And then, of course, you had your line to Meadville, line on Baldwin Street, line over Terrace via over to Lincoln Avenue. So Meadville, for a small-sized city, had a streetcar system that was put together rapidly. If they tried to put the same system in today, they would never get it in as fast as your city people did back in 1898. The system actually opened to the public on April 14th, 1898. Consider that, in a little more than a year. Could you imagine trying to do that today? Why, there'd be opposition. There's an owl's nest. You can't disturb that owl's nest. And what about the reptiles over here on Liberty Street? They have to have a home. We'd have all kinds of excuses. 10 years would go by before the first track would actually get laid down. That's the difference between then and now. They got things done. And it was important because the streetcar system was needed. And the first 8 streetcars were built by St. Louis Car Company. Something else to note. China did not build those streetcars. U.S. built streetcars. And St. Louis Car Company was the company to do it because years later, they built the last modern streetcars in the United States. They had a reputation for quality. It wasn't like Boeing Airlines where the managers would just let the stuff go out to meet somebody's schedule. Back in those days, it was quality. The workers on the line knew exactly what they had to do. They were trained. And the cars, when they arrived in Meadville, they didn't have to go through a debugging period. Today, when they get the modern cars in service on typical city streets, whether it's Toronto or Boston, it takes months to debug these cars. There was no debugging period in Meadville, Pennsylvania. The cars went in service pretty quick. So you had all kinds of cars. You even had 3 open cars. On the first Saturday, when this system opened, now the system opened before the Saturday, but on that first Saturday, over 4,000 people rode the trolleys that day. And the next day on Sunday, 6,500 people rode the trolleys. Now remember, at that time, Meadville had a population of about 10,000. So on that Sunday, 65% of the population was riding this trolley car system. That in itself is phenomenal. So your city pioneers were special. Whatever they did it right. They did it right the first time. And can you imagine the crowd control problems we would have today with 10,000 people coming into Meadville? You'd have all kinds of issues here, but they didn't have it then. Things just worked naturally. People behaved themselves, and Meadville was a special place. Now, they didn't stop there because the goal was to expand the system. On May 30th, 1906, the Meadville and Conneaut Lake Traction Company formed to build a trolley line from Meadville to Exposition Park, which later became known as Conneaut Lake Park. And mind you, a year later, it opens. I mean, this is phenomenal. We as I say, I'm amazed when I look at the history here. We can learn a lot from those people who did things before us. There was a line that opened from Meadville to Linesville. That opened on January 11th, 1908. Meadville was later the Meadville Traction Company was later taken over by the Northwestern Pennsylvania Railway Company. Now, in September 1891, the Edinburgh and Erie Railroad was chartered to build a line from Erie to Edinburgh, and they basically started in Erie at 19th and Myrtle. This is just south of the downtown area. They opened that line to Kearsarge on April 30th in 1900. They reached McLean the same year, September 18th. They opened the Cambridge Springs on September 23rd, 1900. In that 1 year, They did all that work. It just amazes me what they were able to do. And they didn't have all the mechanized equipment that we have today. They didn't have all the technology that we had today, but they did have something that we have that we don't have enough of, and that was the willingness to get something done, the determination to do it, and to do it right the first time. This is a special city with a special transit system. Now, one of the interesting things is that as they built this line, the Erie Traction Company merged with the Meadville and Cambridge Springs Railway, and it became the Northwestern Pennsylvania Railway. It took 2 hours to get from Erie to Meadville by trolley, but you have to remember that trolley made a lot of local stops between Meadville and Erie. So it wasn't slow moving. It served its purpose, provided tremendous accessibility for a whole new region. And this area was so special that President William Howard Taft had to make a visit. He came to ride a trolley car in northwestern Pennsylvania. He arrived via the Erie Railroad to Cambridge Springs. He took a trolley to Edinburgh, and he gave a speech at the State Normal School. After that, he dedicated the Polish National College, and he took the trolley back to Cambridge Springs, went west by Erie Railroad. Now, one of the amazing things is you look at this map, you had nice coverage for your city at that time. And then as these systems grew and matured, there was an expansion, and that expansion went in a lot of different directions. We talked about, let me get this situated right. We talked about the fact that you could go from Cambridge Springs to Meadville and over, basically, you could go from Cambridge Springs north to Erie. But these companies were very smart. Not only were the trolley lines being built in Crawford County, but they were being built simultaneously across the northern frontier. For example, by 1909, this complete system was in place. And these trolley companies were very smart. They decided, let's get along with each other. That's another thing we don't do today. They get along instantaneously. It was recognized, we can get that, we can take care of that company in Meadville that needs to supply a customer all the way over in Oneonta, New York. Several different systems, but they worked together. The track was standard gauge, 4 foot 8.5 inches. There was no question. The very fact that they could build this huge system, this represents 500 miles of trolley lines. And every hour during daylight hours, there was something moving from Meadville through New York State all the way to Oneonta. You could, at one time, between 1909 and 1922, you could go from Oneonta way over in central New York through Rochester, Buffalo, Erie, Chicago, up to Milwaukee, beyond that to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, a distance of 1,082 miles. It would take you 4 days if you made all the connections, but these companies worked together. So if we want to talk about a theme for this program, it's the fact that people worked together then. They got things done then. When they said they were going to do something, they got it done. So these people don't have anything to be ashamed about. They did quality jobs. Everything they did at that time. And it was business because merchants in the Erie area gained customers from your area here. And merchants in Meadville gained customers and freight business from this whole tier along here. So Meadville benefited from the connections they had with the outside world. And then when you add the value of the Erie Railroad serving Meadville directly, you were in a very fortunate, favorable part of the world. You survived, not only survived, you thrived. We don't have that connectivity today. But there were excursions, and these became very popular items. It was added revenue for the trolley system, and it meant new business for the merchants in Meadville. So the trolley line was not just about carrying passengers in the lovely city or the lovely borough of Meadville. It was about making business deals, selling stuff, communicating with the other sections of the country. So the trolley played an important, vital role in this community. Now, things changed. You know, we're in a world that changes constantly. Henry Ford with the automobile came along, and it was successful. And when Henry Ford reduced the price of his Model T to $256, mind you, we can't even buy a monthly payment for $256 today. But when Henry Ford was able to do that, it was like a dramatic change in transportation thinking, because, gosh, ordinary working class people could now afford to buy an automobile, and they did. You know, there was nothing wrong with the trolley system, but remember, you had service every hour. If you had that automobile in your driveway, you didn't have to worry about a trolley schedule. You could just get in and out whenever you wanted to. So it gave people new flexibility. There was nothing wrong with the trolley system, but there was a sweeping technology change. And of course, taxpayers paid for these roads, whereas the trolley system was a private investment. And here's the difference. It's like a good friend, Sandy Porter, opens up a store and he uses his hard cash to build it and stock it. But somebody else, Carl over here, our good friend Carl, gets federal government aid, and he gets a store built and he gets a store stocked. So he can have a sale, and our good friend Sandy can't compete with him. So that's the simplification of what's happening. Every time you see a truck on the highway, all of us have paid for that highway. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying is railroads and trolley systems have a very unfavorable balance today. And so they suffered, and they suffered severely. So what it meant in your area here is that trolley service basically started to be replaced by buses. In Meadville, for example, the first casualty was the trolley line on Baldwin Street. The Baldwin Street trolley line was the first line to be converted to bus operation. It was replaced by the Park Avenue bus. And then gradually, one by one, these trolley lines disappeared. And it was buses were cheaper to operate. You had changes that were occurring here. The trolley system was taken over by the Penn Public Motor Transportation Company. And as soon as that company got involved, buses took over the express service from Meadville to Erie. Now, they still ran trolleys on a local basis, but the buses handled the limited service. That was just step one. And then, of course, step two was a gradual replacement of trolleys by buses. Trolley service to Lionsville ended on January 31st, 1927. They tried to save money. They went from a two-man operation. When we talk about two-man operation, you have a motorman and you have a conductor. The motorman obviously operates the car. The conductor would go from seat to seat collecting fares. So to save money, they went to a one-man operation. They were trying desperately to meet some very difficult obstacles here. And over a period of time, the automobile won out. So even with the expense cutting that they did, all the Meadville trolleys disappeared. All these trolley lines were gone, and with the exception of the interurban line to Erie. They were all gone by Labor Day in 1927. Meadville trolley service ended on September 30th, 1928, from Meadville to Erie, Pennsylvania. That's a very important point to remember, because across the country, there was a massive conversion of trolley lines to bus operation. It just didn't happen here. It happened all across the country because there was a dramatic decline in ridership. There was a dramatic change in the fact that roads were being paved, and this was good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against paved roads. I couldn't have come down here today without Interstate 79. So there's trade-offs here. So I don't want anybody to think that, oh, I'm anti-highway. I'm not anti-highway. We need all this stuff, but we do need rail transit. And so the last trolley in Erie closed in May 12th, 1935, and across the country, during the Depression times, it was wave after wave of trolleys being converted to bus operation. And after World War II kind of put a hold on that, but after World War II, there was a renewed emphasis as more people, as the GIs came home, buying their first automobile, more people. It was a popular thing, not a wrong thing, a very popular thing, and in many cases, a very needed thing to buy automobiles. My father was a streetcar motorman in Philadelphia, and I saw firsthand these car lines being converted to bus operation. But what I'm very proud of, it set a standard for me. My dad went to work with his shoes shined, his uniform was pressed. He did all the right stuff. He would go to work early, and I said to him, I said, Dad, why do you go to work early? He said, son, you don't understand. They're going to be converting the bus operation. They are deferring maintenance. So the guy, he worked the night shift. The guys on day shift would leave him notes. Hey, car number 8025, bad brakes. He would test the car out, and sure enough, the brakes were bad. My dad was smart enough to bypass the foreman, go directly to the top manager there, and the words that they would have had between each other, I wouldn't want to repeat them in this room. I couldn't. You know, it would not be wise to do that. But he got what he needed. Because if there would have been an accident, guess who would have been charged for it? He would have been charged for it. But he was smart enough. He set a standard for me that even though conditions might not always be favorable, you have to do the right thing, no matter what. And so that was very important to me. But the bottom line is, you have a very special heritage here. You are part of the rapid growth of a phenomenal industry in the United States. You are part of the advancement of trolleys in an area that needed it. You basically opened up new frontiers. Meadville benefited from that. And of course, the Erie Railroad made a major contribution to the growth of not only your community, but the communities along the way. Trolleys were disappearing gradually, and actually from the Depression on, after World War II was a temporary halt. But after World War II was over, then there was a company called National City Lines that bought up 37 different transit properties in the United States. Now, just by accident, the car barns, which became bus garages, had General Motors buses, and just by accident, Firestone Tire and Rubber, fueled by Atlantic Richfield, at all 37 properties. Congress fined them $5,000 for restraint of trade. That's like taking a nickel out of somebody's paycheck, you know. It was just a kind of a slap on the wrist. But the bottom line is, they were not the major fault, but they didn't help the situation. The major contribution was the fact that the automobile, well, we all love our automobiles. My wife and I drive, and you have to do that today because you can't get around. Even in a community like this, you do have bus service, but it's limited. So the bottom line is, the trolley has made a contribution to this area, and it's making a contribution today. If the trolley car had been invented in 2024, it would have been declared the outstanding achievement of the century. It is the only type of a vehicle that you can put down a city street, in a subway, on an elevated structure, on a private right-of-way. You can't do that with a diesel bus. And even if you electrified that bus, put that bus in a dark tunnel, and it's not going to get very far. So the trolley actually has a whole new role today. It's actually coming back. In 2019, before the epidemic hit us here, My wife and I went to Kitchener, Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. Now, Toronto is in the same province, but Toronto is just basically north of Buffalo. But Kitchener, Waterloo is the technology center for Canada. I didn't know that until we got there. But 70 miles west in this area, it's an agricultural area, and the people got concerned about urban sprawl. You know, urban sprawl where you take valuable farmland and put a bunch of, supermarkets and housing and all kinds of stuff, which we've been doing a lot in this country. But they got smart there. They realized, we want to save our downtown metropolitan areas. So they had some opposition, but in Canada, it's a little bit different. They don't do the same thing we do. They figure out a way to get the job done. And we were there when they opened up a brand new system. They called a light rail system. Now, none of us can pick up these cars, but you got to have a new name for stuff today. It's a trolley line, a modern trolley line. Instead of a pole, you have a pantograph. Most of it's on private right of way. You'll hear the term light rail transit. There's nothing light about it. None of us can pick it up. But the bottom line is, it basically, the first day, we were there on day one. 22,000 people were in line to ride that trolley. My wife and I were in that group of 22,000. Nobody tried to jump ahead. Everybody was smiling. They were so happy to be there. Get 22,000 people in the United States, and I don't think you'd have the same results today. But they could do it there. Why? Because they wanted to save their downtown areas. They wanted to save the agriculture that they have there. And this Kitchener-Waterloo is the scientific technology area of the whole country of Canada. It's concentrated in that area. So they basically were very successful. In the first 3 days, and the rides were free, but to have 73,000 people ride a new modern trolley system the first 3 days, that is actually incredible. Our northern neighbor, we can learn a lot by our neighbors if we pay attention. The finest urban streetcar system is not in the United States today. It happens to be Toronto, Canada. If you go to Toronto, Canada, they have a modern fleet of cars. Unfortunately, the technology for these cars was very complicated. They got them from a company called Bombardier. Bombardier is famous for a lot of different things, but they had a hard time doing things like making sure the welding was properly done on the car bodies. 2 out of 3 cars had to be rebuilt, brand new cars that cost a fortune, but they got everything fixed up. It took them a while, but back when Meadville opened up their trolley system, the first 8 cars they bought from St. Louis Car Company, they didn't have to debug them. When they were delivered, that day they were put in service. Okay, isn't it amazing? They could do things then. Why? Because people were smart enough to realize, we don't want to ship junk out. We want to make sure the cars are right. And they did. And so when you got those cars, those first 8 cars, they were put in service. They did not have to go through a debugging period. I had to go through a training period with the operators, but they learned quickly. The bottom line is, we can learn a lot from our past. If we forget our past, we're not going to have a future worth remembering. That's why every single one of you are important. All the stuff that you have done here, the hard work that you have done to reclaim this building, the presence that you have here from a historical standpoint and preserving the rail heritage, this can't be replicated by most communities. So you deserve a lot of credit for what you've done. I don't know if the city fathers realize it, but you are a tremendous educational center point for this region, for this state, and frankly, for the whole United States. What you have done here single-handedly over the years, the display you've had over on the main highway with the locomotive and the freight cars, you just didn't do this overnight. So I just want to commend you for the outstanding job you have done in your community. There is not another community in Pennsylvania that can match what every single one of you have done today. So you deserve a round of credit for that. And I hope you can keep doing this, because you are a beacon of light, and we need educational points, and you are a shining star.